In the decayed and destitute town of Seek, a young adventurer walked into a tavern wanting a large mug of beer, only to find the entire place unnaturally silent. Another patron told him that the owner was already dead, murdered by Taldaris last month. It was an evil organization that specialized in abducting children for twisted experiments. Now the tavern had become self-service, a grim testament to the town's decline. The drinkers spat and cursed that it was all the fault of a certain rampaging witch. Her war with the church had stripped ordinary people of protection. As he spoke, low sobbing came from a nearby table. A hooded figure was quietly crying. The adventurer, a little concerned, asked if she was all right. The person raised her head, revealing the stunning face of a woman, tears streaming endlessly from her violet eyes, and explained that she had simply been born this way. Then everyone present was shocked. She introduced herself as Nylis Glory, the very which they had just been cursing. She was Nylis, a soul from another world, now trapped inside the body of the heroine of a third-rate novel. The original Nylis had lived a tragic life. She had been deceived by the church and forced to research the art of immortality until she caused the death of the person she loved and ultimately died herself. But before dying, she activated the magic she had created and sent her soul back 20 years. In the days after her return, she was consumed by vengeance and single-handedly destroyed the church's research center with a storm of fire, earning the title of the Red-Haired Witch. For Nylis, life as a witch was not all bad. She could conjure gold out of thin air. But this new body carried a terrifying curse, uncontrollable depression. Even the tiniest tragedy, even something as trivial as the neighbor's dog dying, could plunge her into deep sorrow. This unending state of despair made her fear that before she could truly begin her second life, she would first be tortured to death by grief. But as the protagonist, she knew she never had to go looking for trouble, because trouble would always come looking for her. Suddenly, a burly Taldaris drill instructor kicked the door open, dragging behind him a child bound in chains. He smugly bragged that he was disciplining a disobedient new recruit. The other patrons whispered fearfully, recognizing him as the man responsible for training the church's army, his hands stained with countless deaths. Then the officer turned his attention to another boy, a stubborn blonde child, accusing him of causing his friend's suffering. Nylis watched the scene coldly, disgusted by such scum. The officer grinned viciously and said he would cut off the boy's legs, but the child moved faster, charging forward and smashing a heavy punch into the brute's jaw. He grabbed the whip the officer dropped, tripped him hard, and sent him crashing down, then raised the whip for a finishing blow. But his opponent quickly recovered and slashed him with a hidden blade. The boy collapsed into a pool of blood, and the officer roared that he would kill him. But at that moment, a slender hand seized his arm and forcibly stopped him. It was Nylis. Calmly, she examined the boy and noticed that although he had no magic, he possessed astonishing C-rank physical ability and combat instinct, exactly the talent mentioned in the novel. Enraged at being interrupted, the officer swung a fist at her. But the instant his fist touched her, his hand was severed clean off at the wrist by an invisible blade. He screamed in agony and demanded to know who she was. When he realized he was facing a witch, his face twisted with fear. Nylis merely smiled faintly and told him that guessing correctly won him no reward. Then she unleashed surging fire magic and burned him to ashes on the spot, coldly mocking that if he wanted to know who she was, he could ask Satan. The other patrons, having witnessed her terrifying power, fled in panic. Once silence fell, Nylis felt the sorrow that had long weighed on her suddenly vanish, replaced by a hollow emptiness. A man begged her to save the other boy, but she could not. Her magic was a witch's curse. To others, it was poison. And as the man's desperate cries echoed through the air, Nylis felt her own helplessness and despair quietly creeping back in her heart. Just then, the blond boy staggered forward, golden light glowing in his hands, and healed his companion's wounds. For a moment, Nylis stared at him in shock. He was actually a holy knight. She pulled open his collar and saw the star-shaped brand borne only by Taldaris's sole candidate for holy knight. It was him, Harvey Augustine, the church's strongest warrior. In the previous timeline, he was the one who destroyed her resistance army and killed her with his own hands. The most rational choice was to eliminate him now, before the threat could mature. Her hand had already closed around his throat, and the image of her own death flashed before her eyes. But looking at the child's innocent face, she hesitated. In the end, she could not do it. In the end, she only asked whether he was willing to come with her. That decision later became the source of her regret, because a few years later, Harvey, much more grown by then, would rush in after a mission, pull her tightly into his arms, and demand the reward that belonged to him. Nylis sighed, realizing she had just adopted the greatest trouble of her life. Under cover of night, the witch Nylis arrived at a quiet inn, with a small blonde boy clinging to her leg like a shadow. She coolly asked the stunned receptionist for a double room and ordered food for the child as well. When a woman at the front desk asked if the boy was her younger brother, Nylis's smile turned as thin as a blade, and she casually classified him as something more like a pet. But their shelter was fleeting. Through the window, she saw guards posting wanted notices bearing her portrait all over the city walls, a cold reminder that they were still being hunted. Inside the room, the boy was shoving noodles into his mouth with his hands and was immediately met with Nylis's sharp scolding for having no manners at all. She suddenly remembered something. Once, she had patiently taught him how to use a fork. That tenderness had been buried deep in her heart. As she watched him eat, she studied him with almost clinical curiosity, wondering whether he was truly mute. Then a horrifying detail from the novel's plot suddenly burst into her mind: the villainous organization. Taldaris implanted magical parasites into children, forging them into mindless weapons, shells that felt no pain, knew no fatigue, and were driven only by the urge to fight. Only then did she realize in horror that this boy was one of those weapons. She knew there was still time to remove the parasite, and it might even restore his voice, but the process was lethally dangerous. If she made even the slightest mistake while guiding magic through his body, he would die on the spot. Frustration made her scream soundlessly, and in the end, she could only accept the one remaining option: summon a divine artifact she had sealed away years ago. With reluctant command, Nylis awakened her staff, Mammon, a twisted entity covered in thorns and carved with savage faces, manifested and called her name the moment it opened its mouth. The boy Harvey gasped in fright and shrank back. Nylis thought back to Mammon. In the novel, it was her most trusted ally, but she knew the truth. It radiated a darkness that repelled her on an instinctive level, which was why she had once sealed it in the void of time. If she had not been cornered, she would never have summoned it again. With Mammon's almost encyclopedic knowledge, they began a bizarre ritual, brewing a potent magical potion in a cauldron with sliced lizard and exotic herbs. When the pot of stew-like liquid was finally complete, Harvey mistook it for dinner. Nylis did not even have time to warn him what kind of heart-rending agony he would suffer if he drank it before he picked up the pot and started gulping it down. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The pot shattered, and he collapsed to the floor convulsing, coughing blood, his whole body writhing in unbearable pain. The sight stirred an almost forgotten memory in Nylis. She herself had once been bound by thorns in a desolate prison, enduring the same agony. Shaken by the past, she hurried to the boy's side and pulled him tightly into her arms. In a low voice, she said she would bear the pain in his place. Soft light enveloped them both, and his suffering gradually subsided. Late that night, Harvey jolted awake from a nightmare and found himself sleeping safely beside her. He saw tear stains and blood still lingering on her sleeping face, proof that she had taken his pain upon herself and gently touched her cheek. Sometime later, they arrived at a bustling market, and Harvey had started learning to speak out loud, complaining that the fruit was ridiculously expensive. Nylis was amused by his progress, but when he clearly called out her name, Nylis, she still froze. She tried to insist that he use a more formal form of address, but he stubbornly repeated it over and over, softening her heart with ease. Just then, a horse suddenly broke free of its reins and charged wildly through the crowd, heading straight for them. Before Nylis could cast a spell, a woman had already thrown herself in front of Harvey and shielded him with her own body. Nylis stared in disbelief, shocked that in this cruel world, someone would still risk her life for a stranger. The woman anxiously fussed over Harvey, asking whether he was hurt. When Harvey asked who she was, her eyes filled with tears as she told him she was his mother. Those words left both Harvey and Nylis completely frozen. That plain little house, meant to be only a temporary refuge for Nylis and the boy Harvey, quickly became a home overflowing with sorrow. The homeowners, Ford and Sanera, were a grieving couple who had lost their son months ago. The moment Sanara saw Harvey, it was as if she had seen the ghost of her own child. Swift, and the grief she had long suppressed burst through the dam, tears pouring forth and sweeping her husband into them as well. Nylis was momentarily stunned by the sudden wailing and quickly pulled Harvey to her side so he would not be knocked over by the storm of emotion. She regained control of the situation soon enough, but a trace of displeasure still crossed her face. She had almost forgotten that this body had another irritating flaw. It was easily affected by other people's emotions. They should have left, but Ford wanted to cheer Harvey up, so he offered to show him his workshop, which was filled with gleaming swords. Just as they were about to be led away, Sanara grabbed Nylis by the arm, her eyes full of urgent questions. She asked where their parents were. Nylis's mind raced, and she made up a story, saying they were orphans who had grown up together. To her shock, what appeared on the woman's face was not pity, but a strange thought. She asked whether they would be willing to become her and Ford's children. Sanara confessed that she had always dreamed of having a beautiful daughter so she could brush her hair for her. Nylis had intended to refuse, but the words caught in her throat, so she simply went along with it. She pretended to cooperate and let Sanara gently brush her black hair. With wistfulness in her voice, the woman spoke of the daughter she had never had, then sighed that her son Swift had left home after growing up to chase his ideals, and that road had ultimately led him to his death. When Nylis softly asked how he died, Sanara's tones suddenly turned hard. Her son had worked for the church and died in battle against a witch. The word struck Nylis like something tangible, and she seemed to see blood splashing across her skirt again. Not long after, the couple went out to buy ingredients for dinner, leaving Nylis and the sleeping Harvey alone in the quiet house. The instant the door closed, a cold voice sounded in the room, mockingly asking Mistress Nylis whether she felt even a shred of guilt after killing their son. The shadow entity called Mammon appeared. Nylis warned it to mind its tongue, or she would smash it to pieces again. Mammon merely reminded her that the couple's invitation to stay might itself be a trap. Meanwhile, at the market, the couple's cheerful shopping was interrupted by alarming news. Someone nearby had spotted that witch. She was accused of killing an officer and abducting a child. Sanara's face instantly went pale, but fear quickly turned into cold resolve. She urgently questioned the townspeople about what the abducted child looked like. By the time she returned home alone, she still put on a bright face in front of Harvey, saying that Ford was in the workshop. But as she began taking out the things she had bought one by one, her smile vanished in an instant. The next moment, she suddenly raised a pair of scissors and lunged at Harvey. Harvey barely dodged the attack, but then the boy realized his whole body had gone rigid, and he could not move at all, forced to watch as Sanara drew closer. A calm voice ordered her to stop. Sanara looked up and saw Nylis's hair abruptly turning a blazing red. The woman stumbled back in terror, finally recognizing the legendary red-haired witch. Harvey tried to stand in front of her, but Nylis shoved him aside, a cruel smile on her face as she asked whether he really thought she needed his protection. Tearing away all pretense, she declared that she was indeed the vicious which they feared, and pressed the scissors back against Sanara's neck, drawing a thin line of blood along her throat. Nylis even remarked regretfully that it was a pity. She had originally planned to wait until after dinner before making her move. Just as she gathered a mass of energy to strike, Ford rushed in holding a rifle and shouted for his wife to run. But driven by desperate love, Sanara instead shoved him away and took the full force of the magical blast in his place. Horrified beyond words, Ford leveled a rifle at Nylis and warned Harvey that she was a monster who had killed countless people. The injured Sanara desperately tried to pull the boy to her side, pleading that Mommy would protect him. Nylis played along with their words and coldly told Harvey to go with them. She had never wanted to take care of a child anyway. But Harvey refused. He shook off Sanara's hand, ran back to embrace Nylis, and demanded to know why she was pushing him away. She told him this was his chance to have a normal life, a loving family, a future that would not force him to bear the hatred she carried. Harvey screamed that he did not want any of that. He declared that no matter what happened, they would always stay together. That almost stubborn loyalty pierced straight through Nylis's icy shell. Completely enraged by the scene, Sanara raised a rifle and swore to avenge her innocent son. Nylis's expression instantly turned glacial. She asked Sanera whether she truly believed her son was innocent. Did she know what kind of work he had really been doing in the church? With a light wave of her hand, she forcibly thrust an image into the woman's mind. Her beloved Swift was no hero, but a cruel sadist, whipping a defenseless prisoner who could not resist at all. The rifle slipped from Sanara's trembling hands. She collapsed to the floor, repeating again and again in denial that her son was not that kind of person. Nylis's voice was soft, yet heavy enough to seem laden with all the sorrow in the world. She admitted that she remembered every life that had died by her hand. She remembered finding Swift dying on the battlefield, and that his final words had been a cry for his mother. She explained that when she burned his body, she had in fact been cleansing the world of the sins he carried. The truth finally shattered Sanera completely. She could do nothing but let out a heart-rending wail. 6 years later, in a peaceful village, two children were bickering over a handmade cloth doll, their innocent squabble feeling worlds away from the tragedy that had once happened. In the sunlit village, a kind young man named Harvey was meticulously repairing a magical device for a neighbor. People praised his skill, marveled that the device had been designed by his older sister, and worried about her health, saying she was a genius who could make a fortune in a big city. Harvey only smiled and explained that for the two of them, his quiet life was already enough. He politely declined the invitation to stay for a meal, saying he still had to go home and cook for his sister. After waving goodbye, the villagers all remarked on what a good boy he was. However, two local children, Ram and Emily, were filled with curiosity. It had already been 5 years since Harvey and his sister moved here, yet no one had ever truly seen the reclusive girl. To solve the mystery, they decided to follow Harvey all the way home, watching this universally beloved Harvey being greeted warmly by everyone along the road, while feeling a bit jealous and dissatisfied themselves. They trailed him all the way to his secluded cabin at the edge of the woods. When they found the door unlocked, they quietly slipped inside and called Harvey's name. But just then, Harvey suddenly appeared behind them and gave them a fright. He explained that he had just been talking with his sister Nylis, and that she had fallen asleep in the laboratory. The children's curiosity was instantly ignited, and they hurriedly asked if they were finally going to meet her. But Harvey's usually friendly expression darkened for a moment, and he was about to refuse. Before he could send them away, a gentle voice came from the staircase, saying that guests had come to the house. A breathtaking woman with long black hair slowly descended the stairs, and the two children were struck dumb. An awkward silence filled the air. Nylis brought them tea, looking calm on the surface while trembling inside. She had completely fallen into panic. After hiding at home for years and letting Harvey handle everything outside, her social skills had nearly deteriorated to nothing. She agonized over what to say, afraid that one wrong word would make people dislike her. Completely captivated, Emily sighed that Nylis was so beautiful that it was no wonder Harvey had no interest in the village girls. Then she blurted out that the two of them did not look alike at all. Nylis explained that they were not related by blood, only two orphans who relied on each other. As she spoke, Harvey gently draped a shawl over her shoulders. Touched by the gesture, Nylis wanted to contribute something too, so she announced that she would make snacks for everyone. Harvey asked anxiously if she was sure, since she had never cooked before. But she confidently assured him that she would never let him lose face on the first day he brought friends home. 3 hours later, she brought out a crooked, monstrous-looking cake. The children tried their best to say tactfully that taste was what mattered most. But the moment they took a bite, the nauseating flavor exploded in their mouths. It was burnt and raw at the same time, cloyingly sweet, like pure sugar mixed with mud. As they forced themselves to swallow it, Nylis hurried to apologize, but Harvey, wearing a blissful smile, took a huge bite and declared the cake absolutely delicious. He even wiped a smudge from her face and praised her for doing well, leaving the others dumbfounded. After night fell, the children were invited to stay over. Nylis sweetly told Emily that she could call her big sister too, just like Harvey did. But when Emily and Ram excitedly tried calling her that, Harvey's expression darkened, and his voice dropped to an icy whisper as he said they could not. In his mind, a furious voice screamed, "She is my sister, mine alone." When he escorted them to their room, the friendly mask had already returned to his face. But the smile he wore when he said good night still sent a chill down their spines. Once they were alone, they agreed on one thing. Harvey was absolutely someone you should never provoke. Later, Emily tried to scare Ram with a local legend about a man-eating vine, the story of a hunter who was ambushed by a living plant. His whole body was swallowed, and when he was found later, all that remained was a shriveled sheet of human skin drained completely dry. The story worked a little too well, and Ram fainted on the spot from fright. Unable to sleep, Emily wandered outside and discovered a glowing flower. Following a trail of shining vines, she walked into a greenhouse. There, to her horror, she saw the boy from the legend trapped inside. Meanwhile, in her room, Nylis was being tormented by a voice explaining the curse she bore. If she let the vine die naturally, it would take 3 days. But if she used magic to save its prisoner, the vine would die immediately and bring destruction to everything it touched. A creak startled her, and she spun around, magic bursting from her hand. Emily peeked through the crack in the door and asked who she had been talking to. The moment she saw what was before her, her eyes widened. Beneath the full moon, Nylis stood in a dreamlike garden of faintly glowing vines, immersed in its otherworldly beauty. Emily murmured, "So beautiful," then gasped in pure awe, realizing she was witnessing true magic with her own eyes. Nylis showed her young guest Emily a magical plant called the astral vine and explained that it was a sentient life form capable of communication. When Emily reached out to touch it, the vine recoiled shyly. Nylis gently stroked its petals with a sorrowful expression and whispered an apology. She confessed that the plant was dying, and that this tragedy was something she had caused unintentionally. Her unique magic was a terrifyingly powerful curse that killed all living things. She had only tried to cultivate the vine on a whim, an experiment she had never expected to succeed, but now it had become just another failure. Yet Emily, full of youthful optimism, realized that the vine simply needed magic from elsewhere and eagerly begged Nylis to teach her. The commotion woke a boy named Ram, who argued that Emily had no talent at all and that this was far too dangerous. Suddenly, Nylis slammed the door open, her face filled with panic as she screamed that she would absolutely not teach them. But in her agitation, she stumbled and pitched forward, only to be caught securely by the strong arms of a blond boy. That boy was Harvey. After Emily explained the situation, Ram scolded her for causing trouble for their teacher, but Harvey's attention was fixed entirely on Nylis. With unwavering devotion in his eyes, he asked whether saving the vine would make her happy. He declared that if it would make her happy, then it was the right thing to do. His sincerity only made her draw back. It triggered a painful flashback, a former student dying in agony, crying out for teacher with her final breath, the sound still echoing in Nylis's mind. That was her curse, bringing calamity to everyone around her. Yet a cold resolve gradually formed in her heart. She reminded herself that she was only a transmigrator, and that the original Nylis's misfortunes were not something she had to shoulder. Seizing the opportunity, she decided this was the best way to free herself from the witch's shadow, and agreed to teach the 3 of them magic. However, with a sly smile, she added one condition. They had to obey her every order without question. The next day, training began, but instead of spells, it was brutal physical labor. Harvey practiced swordsmanship with ease, while Ram and Emily were forced to run lap after lap until they collapsed from exhaustion. Nylis, meanwhile, lounged beneath a parasol like a tyrant queen, sipping a drink and paying no mind to their suffering. 3 hours later, she ordered Harvey to assign them their next task, cleaning the house and fetching water. She asked Harvey whether he minded her tormenting his friends like this, but he simply answered that he trusted she was doing it for their own good. Later that night, he quietly came to her door and saw her sadly gazing at the withering astral vine. That brief moment of vulnerability made him stop in his tracks. He then left a plate of food outside her door and went away. The next day, their real magic lesson began. Nylis first demonstrated a transformation spell, turning an ordinary sparrow into a stunning fire phoenix soaring through the sky. Buzzing with excitement, Emily could not wait to try it herself and immediately focused her spell on a nearby bird. She was wondering why nothing had happened until Nylis pointed out that she had accidentally turned Ram's head into a giant pumpkin instead, making him explode with rage on the spot. Her next attempt was no better, transforming the poor boy into a squealing little pig, a sight that nearly made Nylis laugh without stopping. By the end of the day, Ram had managed at best to turn the bird into a motionless paper crane and earned a pitiful score of 57. Emily, although her results were a chaotic mess, displayed astonishing talent, transforming the bird into a whole group of adorable animals and earning 87 points. Once everyone's eyes turned to him, Harvey was urged to step forward and try as well. He concentrated, dazzling golden light erupting around him, and then cast the spell, but the only result was a small breeze, while the target bird simply hopped away, completely unaffected. Harvey froze in disbelief, his face flushing red with shame, while Nylis bent over laughing at his total failure. Emily and Ram tried to comfort him, but when they implied that Nylis was a bad teacher who gave up on the week too easily, that only made her even angrier. Determined to teach them a lesson, she directly fired off a blast of dark magic, but Harvey instinctively raised his sword and knocked the attack aside with a clang. He frantically apologized at once, while Nylis looked at him knowingly and told him that the answer was already in his own hands. She revealed his true nature. The reason he had no aptitude for magic was because he possessed astonishing talent with the sword, along with an innate gift for healing. He was a born paladin. She told him not to despair, because one day he would leave her and become a great hero. With a faintly mischievous smile, she also reminded him not to forget to repay her when that day came. But at that moment, struck by her words, Harvey grabbed her arm and stopped her from turning away. She looked back, confused by his sudden seriousness. He was staring down at the ground, his expression a mixture of shock and slowly hardening resolve. As the sun set, Harvey decided to practice a little longer. His focus did not waver in the slightest as he continued training magic alone in a nearby clearing. Ram and Emily watched from the side. Ram pointed out that what Harvey was truly obsessed with was not magic itself, but someone he treasured. He cast a meaningful glance at Nylis and explained that some people were driven by fame, others by faith, while Harvey simply wanted to share the same goal as her. Then Ram posed a chilling question. If mages and knights walked different paths, then once Harvey inevitably had to go train in swordsmanship, could their relationship really withstand that distance? Emily was angered by his blunt words, but Nylis did not care in the least. Instead, she suddenly came up with an excellent idea for motivating the boy. She gathered everyone together and led them deep into the forest to practice attack magic in a place inhabited by dangerous creatures. Before they realized it, they had wandered into the territory of demon wolves, and a pack of hungry beasts emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing eerily. Only then did Nylis panic, realizing they had made a mistake, and hurriedly tried to cast a spell, but her magic failed, and one of the wolves lunged straight at her. In a flash of blood and steel, Harvey intercepted the beast in time and cut it down. He immediately checked on her, but Nylis was swallowed by icy fear. She realized that her mistake had nearly gotten everyone killed. Forcing herself to stay calm, she told Harvey to hold them off a little longer so she could prepare a truly effective spell. Harvey merely curled his lips in a faint smile, seeing through her disguise at a glance, yet still agreed to play along because it was what she herself had asked for. While he skillfully blocked the charging demon wolves with his longsword, Nylis completed her chant and unleashed a devastating blast of light that annihilated the entire pack. Harvey remained standing there, his blood-stained longsword pinned into the corpse of the last wolf. Ram and Emily cheered for his astonishing skill, while Nylis praised him extravagantly, declaring that he was the only person she could rely on. For a moment, Harvey said nothing, making everyone think their plan had failed. But then he turned back with a flushed face and asked whether she truly needed his help that much. Ram let out a sigh and explained to the disillusioned Emily that this was simply their own peculiar way of getting along. He also recalled a moment in the past when Harvey had been just as easily swayed by the same kind of praise. Later, Emily successfully cast a growth spell and created a staff entwined with vines. Watching all of this, a sliver of hope pierced Nylis's cynical heart. Seeing Emily's astonishing progress, she could not help but begin to wonder whether what she had once believed was hopeless might not truly be hopeless after all. A long life spent hiding had left her stagnant and afraid to move forward. Beaming with pride, Emily insisted on giving the new staff a name. Nylis had always avoided such things, lest she have to bear the pain of parting. The innocent suggestion triggered a dark and bloody memory, but Nylis quickly suppressed it and told Emily she could call it whatever she liked. Alone in her room, She thought about Emily's talent, but her thoughts gradually turned grim again. She knew that no matter how gifted an ordinary person might be, they could never bridge the gap between themselves and a true genius. That painful lesson was one she had learned from her first and last student, Mycarla Simmons. The vision of Mycarla dying at Nylis's hands flashed through her mind again, a forever blood-soaked reminder of failure. She tried to convince herself that Emily was different, but her fear of loss was too overwhelming, making her even more certain that she should never form bonds with anyone. Just then, a sudden thud at the window made her jump. To her shock, she saw Harvey climbing in through the window. Smiling, he explained that the door was locked and invited her to go into town with him. He even promised to buy her muffins. Nylis immediately bristled, refusing to go outside after hiding for 6 years and demanding to know why he was always trying to drag her back into the world. Harvey looked at her gently and said it was because spring was coming. In the end, persuaded at last, Nylis stepped into the lively town. The first thing she did was rush over to the wanted notices and nervously check them one by one, only to find no trace of her face anywhere. An immense wave of relief washed through her at once. After 6 long years in hiding, she celebrated so joyfully that even her companions were stunned. As they ate snacks together, Ram remarked that under the new leadership, the city had become so peaceful, small mercy that it was. After the church fell, Nylis noticed the people around them staring at her and quickly realized it was because she and Harvey together were simply too eye-catching. In a magic item shop, she became wildly excited over a staff, so cute it was almost ridiculous. Well-dressed Harvey immediately told the shopkeeper to wrap it up without a second thought. He paid for her entire shopping trip as well, and admitted to Ram that he had been saving money for years for this very day, because to him, her happiness mattered most. However, in the middle of that perfect day, a man bumped into them and shouted rudely at them to watch where they were going. After he turned and walked away, Emily suddenly gasped and realized her wallet was gone. Narrowing her eyes in fury, she brandished her new staff and declared that now was the perfect time to test its magic on a thief. The next instant, driven by righteous anger, Emily unleashed a torrent of magic at the cornered thief, screaming for him to die. But before her spell could hit its target, a system warning flashed, hostile action detected. Immediately after, a pillar of dazzling light crashed down, trapping her inside a glowing cage while shattering her staff. Her companions could only watch in horror as 2 figures rushed over from the newly formed Knights of Heimdall's Light. One was a calm man with long hair named Oliver Calmly, who recognized the thief as George Moore and declared on the spot that he was under arrest. His red-haired partner Maria, meanwhile, judged Emily to be an outsider and prepared to take her away as well. Stepping forward, Nylis demanded in an ice-cold voice exactly what crime Emily had committed. Maria let out a mocking laugh and pointed to the emblem on her uniform, declaring that Emily's crime was the illegal use of force, a right that belonged only to the Night Order. Oliver smugly reminded Nylis not to act rashly and warned that if she resisted, she would become an accomplice, but his words fell completely on deaf ears. Nylis merely responded with casual indifference, then reached out and touched the magical cage. With a sharp, ringing crack, it shattered instantly into countless motes of light. Coldly, she asked how they now intended to deal with her own impulsive act, leaving both Oliver and Maria utterly stunned by her unknown magic. Just as Maria was about to react, Oliver suddenly vanished, only to appear a second later, kneeling on one knee before Nylis. In a dramatic flourish, he declared himself captivated by her and even made the bizarre request that she step on his face. Seizing that absurd moment of distraction, Harvey charged forward and slashed Oliver's arm with his sword, placing himself protectively in front of Nylis. Nylis dryly remarked that Oliver seemed to have a dog of his own as well, referring to Harvey standing guard before her. Oliver merely healed his wound with golden light, revealing that, like Harvey, he too was a paladin. The standoff grew more and more tense, and Maria issued a final warning. Hand over Emily within 3 seconds, or all of them would be arrested. As the countdown began, Harvey anxiously asked Nylis if she had a plan. But Nylis was caught in a dilemma. She did not want to expose her identity, yet she could not abandon Emily either. Just as the count reached 3, their friend Ram suddenly rushed between both sides, creating a chaotic interruption. With remarkable polish, he diffused the situation by appealing to the guard's duty to protect civilians, while spinning a story that they were merely country folk who had panicked and overreacted in fear. The tactic worked. Maria relented a step, but insisted that all of them report to headquarters to learn the rules. Once inside the massive building that had once served as the church's prison, Nylis calmly observed everything. Inwardly, she judged that Oliver and Maria were certainly no ordinary guards. The paladin had merely been testing Harvey's strength earlier. In a real fight, Harvey would only have been swiftly defeated. Realizing that her destruction of the church had already caused a butterfly effect and changed the world she had once known from the novel, icy fear surged through her. This newly formed organization and its powerful members were all unknown variables, forcing her to accept that if she wanted to survive, she needed more information. When they registered their identities, Harvey skillfully lied about their origins to avoid arousing suspicion. Afterward, he told the nervous Ram that this was just a little secret between them, so they would not end up on the Night Order's blacklist. They were then given several books on the nation's laws, and Nylis was shocked to learn from Maria that Maria herself was a powerful mage, while Oliver was a paladin so strong that even the royal capital found him troublesome. Maria explained that the Night Order was a place capable of accepting special people like them, something of which she was quite proud. While Nylis's companions marveled at those unexpectedly strict, yet fair laws, Maria admitted that the Order was currently shorthanded. Turning to them with a thoughtful smile, she extended an unexpected invitation. She wanted them to join Heimdall's Light. The offer hung in the air, but Nylis coldly refused to join the Night Order without a moment's hesitation, greatly disappointing her companions, who had dreamed of gaining the power of Heimdall's emblem. The red-haired woman, Zora, lifted the corners of her mouth in a smile and clarified that Nylis was not their primary target. The one they truly wanted was the boy Harvey. She also revealed that Harvey's friend Oliver had intentionally taken that hit during the clash earlier solely to test Harvey's astonishing latent talent. Zora insisted that someone with such aptitude absolutely could not be allowed to slip away, urging Harvey to at least seriously consider their proposal and hinting that if he agreed, an additional pleasant surprise awaited him. As if on cue, the strongest swordsman in the Night Order appeared, a man with long, pale violet hair. The moment he arrived, he immediately tried to flirt with Nylis, and Harvey's face darkened visibly with anger. However, the swordsman did not take Harvey seriously at all and dismissed him as someone he had little to teach. That arrogant contempt instantly ignited Harvey's temper, and he challenged the man to a duel on the spot. The swordsman let out a scornful laugh, accepted from his lofty position, and declared that he would fight using only one hand. Harvey's friends nervously cheered him on, even shouting for him to knock the man's teeth out. The duel began in a blur of swift movement. Harvey attacked with brute force, but the swordsman elegantly and effortlessly blocked every strike. Harvey narrowed his eyes, gathering his strength with intense focus as he prepared one final powerful slash. His opponent met him with a chilling smile and used a technique called Grand Judgment. Yet with astonishing instinct, Harvey dodged at the very last second and pressed his wooden sword to the swordsman's throat. But the victory lasted only a moment. The swordsman revealed that his true blade had already been resting against Harvey's back, and coldly pointed out that Harvey's fundamentals were a complete mess. He admitted that Harvey had excellent physical ability and outstanding battle talent, but without proper training, all of it would go to waste. Even so, he also saw in the boy's eyes an unquenchable thirst for learning, and predicted that so long as he kept that spirit, surpassing him would only be a matter of time. Both shaken and encouraged, Harvey turned to Nylis and asked whether he could remain with the Night Order to study swordsmanship. She immediately objected, her tone sharp as she listed the practical problems one by one: the long journey, the chores back home, and his selfishness. Harvey lowered his face in disappointment, but Nylis's expression softened. She reached out and flicked his forehead, calling him an idiot because he always thought only of her, and forced him to say what he truly wanted for himself. She insisted that he owed her nothing and had every right to choose his own path. With a gentle smile, she promised that no matter what, she would always be at home waiting for him to return. Completely struck by her support, Harvey murmured that she was being unfairly kind, his heart overflowing with gratitude gratitude and aching emotion. His resolve fully set at last. Harvey bid everyone farewell and stepped into his new life of his own choosing. After the recruitment team left to celebrate successfully bringing him over to their side, Nylis tried to sort out his schedule, but the cult members insisted on installing a teleportation array for him. Afterward, they gave Nylis and the others a tour, explaining that everything around them had been built by their genius head of magic. Zora explained that the cult was facing a serious problem. If Heimdall's harsh laws were strictly enforced, half the people in town would end up in prison over trivial offenses, completely dragging society into ruin. Their solution was a revolutionary magical device capable of altering a person's perception of time, making a 3-day sentence feel like 3 months of punishment. The very concept of manipulating time struck something deep within Nylis, making her feel like a fragment left behind from some past she could never fully grasp. Zora excitedly led them to meet the head of magic, only to trip in her haste and send books flying everywhere. A gentle voice chided her for being so careless, and then a young woman with glasses introduced herself as Mycarla Simmons, head of the Magical Creation Department. The moment she saw Mycarla, Nylis suddenly lost control of her emotions, tears spilling from her eyes. Her friends immediately panicked, but Zora explained that Nylis had a special constitution and cried whenever she saw something sad, which prompted an eerie whisper wondering how much longer Mycarla had left to live. But through her sobs, Nylis clarified that these were not tears of sorrow, but tears of joy, the feeling of finding something once lost. Even so, the meeting still turned into a mess, because Nylis's crying triggered Mycarla's own anxiety, sending her into a frenzy of non-stop apologies. In desperation, Mycarla asked whether Nylis could make a calming perfume for her. As an expert in potions, Nylis suggested improving the formula by using leaves and branches to balance out the overly potent flowers. This simple yet nearly revolutionary idea left Mycarla utterly stunned on the spot. Zora watched in awe as Nylis skillfully redirected Mycarla's anxiety and guided her step by step through the making of the potion. Later, over tea, Mycarla told them her story, revealing that she came from a famous family of mages, yet had been the least gifted among them. Her parents had sent her to the academy, but by the time she arrived, it had already become a ruin. Lost and alone, she was taken in by the cult, and it was there that she finally found her true calling, to create magical devices that could help others. She then showed everyone their research, which was divided into 4 departments: magic simplification, device development, weapon enchantment, and their main project. She led them into a vast hall dominated by a giant glowing core and explained its true purpose: a device that could turn time backward. Her eyes shone with feverish light as she declared that if they succeeded, they could grant humanity the ultimate gift, immortality. The promise of immortality hung in the air, a dangerous and seductive dream. The brilliant young researcher Mycarla explained their discovery. It was an unfinished magic circle left behind by the Church of Destruction, the key to giving humans the same deathless bodies as elves. One of her companions said uneasily that this was dark magic, but Mycarla launched into a speech about how power itself was neither good nor evil, insisting that the line between good and evil was only a fleeting concept, constantly rewritten by history. She turned to Nylis, hope shimmering in her eyes, assured her that the royal family had already approved the project, and begged for her support. But all Nylis could see was a tragedy repeating itself. She remembered her own innocent youth, when she too had devoted her life to the pursuit of magic with a pure heart, only for mounting pressure to ultimately force her to stain her hands with innocent blood. She had lost everything, lost everyone she treasured, and now she understood that the temptation of immortality was a poison that would inevitably spread out of control. As Mycarla smiled with naive pride, a dark voice whispered in Nylis's mind. Mammon urged her to kill the girl right now, asking whether she had not come back precisely to snuff out this foolish plan with her own hands. It incited her, telling her to drown the entire city in blood and corpses just as before. Nylis silently rejected that violent path, vowing to make Mycarla abandon it of her own accord, because she knew that acting directly would only alert her true enemies. She confidently told the demon inside her that my Carla would never succeed, because the cruel truth was that this girl she had once taught had absolutely no talent for this kind of magic. For the moment, Nylis was right. The research had stalled, trapped by ancient spells far beyond my Carla's understanding. Even so, Nylis could not shake the feeling that some greater being was manipulating things from behind the scenes, and that my Carla was only their unwitting puppet. To get answers, she needed to move closer. The opportunity came quickly. When she saw her companions drinking, a sly plan began to form in her mind. Pretending to be disappointed that everyone had not properly bonded, she easily coaxed my Carla into a small gathering. The young researcher had a terrible tolerance for alcohol and soon clutched her cup while gulping it down, while Zora got so drunk she passed out on the spot. My Carla confessed that she felt a strange and profound familiarity with Nylis, as if they had known each other in a past life. She had no idea how ironic those words were, but they pierced Nylis deeply. With tears in her eyes, my Carla admitted that for the first time in her life she felt needed, and swore that no matter the cost, she would succeed. When the girl finally fell asleep on her lap, Nylis, full of sorrow, whispered an apology to her former student. She knew that, whether in the past or now, she had never managed to be a good teacher. To save my Carla's life, she was destined to destroy her dream with her own hands. While the others were unconscious, Nylis quietly slipped into the archives. She searched the personnel list of the magic department for clues. Just as she found a promising lead, a voice broke the silence. She had been discovered. The one who came was Harvey, and his expression was impossible to read. Her thoughts flashed back to the document she had just read. It detailed how the witch hunt against her had never truly stopped. Her identity had only remained hidden because of the red-haired demon's memories, and that demon was one she herself had created. Now, facing Harvey's sharp gaze, she had nowhere to run. He locked the door behind him and demanded to know what exactly she had been doing. Under his stare, all her excuses collapsed instantly, and in his eyes, she saw a certain expression, one she had not seen since the day she abandoned him in childhood. Harvey said he hated how she was always hiding secrets, then pulled her into his arms. He confessed that he had waited a full 6 years, hoping that one day she would trust him enough to let him share some of her burdens. He begged her not to carry everything alone anymore, and reminded her that he had once promised he would always stay by her side. Memories flooded back into Nylis's mind, a promise between a woman and a little boy to face everything together. But ever since reuniting with my Carla, she had retreated back into her shell, becoming once again the cold, isolated witch she used to be. She feared that Harvey would hate her once he learned the truth, but in the end she decided to take the risk and pulled out a book as a token of trust. But just as he reached out to take it, the true memory of his fate flashed violently through her mind. She saw him bound in chains, broken apart, reduced to a sacrifice for experiments, and herself unable to stop it. She remembered how completely she had destroyed his life. In the dust-covered library, Nylis tested Harvey's memory by asking whether he still remembered Taldaris, the organization that had kidnapped him years ago. He remembered it as the day they first met, but she revealed the darker truth. Taldaris had served the church, and they abducted children with magical talent in order to create shadow guards. Their ultimate goal was a plan for immortality, and as horror slowly surfaced on his face, Harvey learned that he himself had once been a central part of that twisted plan. This story began long ago. According to legend, there had once been a group of witches with great power who dared to defy the sun god and sought to stand as equals to him. When the sun god granted immortality only to true believers, those slighted witches tried to steal it. They moved under cover of night, but then vanished from history. It was from this shared faith and hatred that the church was born, and its authority even surpassed that of the royal family. Yet as time passed and science advanced, their influence gradually waned, forcing them to conceive the immortality plan in an attempt to reclaim their former glory. It was then that a researcher within the church gave birth to a girl. She was a prodigy, able to speak at 6 months old and cast high-level magic at the age of 3. She gave herself the name Nylis Gloral, but to those who had raised her with cold indifference, she had always been known by only one title, the Witch. Her life was a rigid routine without warmth, and every day began with greeting a silent paladin bound in chains. He was locked to a chair in a dark room, and his sharp gaze always frightened her. Beneath that calm exterior, silent fury was always churning. At the age of 14, she was assigned to become his first partner in the immortality experiments. His vocal cords had been destroyed by a magical parasite, and he could only produce low, hoarse growls. Everyone else ignored him, but Nylis stubbornly insisted on trying to communicate with him. She suggested that since he could not speak, he should write instead. But there was no paper around, so she held out her own hand to him as a canvas for his words. He hesitated, then gently took her small hand and traced two simple words onto it: "You're noisy." The unexpected reply made her burst out laughing. In that desolate laboratory, she found her first companion. But that fragile bond was only the prelude to horror. With a clinically calm mask on her face, Nylis told him that his body was adapting, so she had to increase the dosage. Holding a syringe filled with crimson liquid, she gave him a chilling smile and told him to endure it. At that time, she still had no idea how to treasure another life. The church used her as a vessel, forcing countless potions down her throat and transforming her blood into witch's blood, a substance believed to grant both immortality and immense power. The results truly were powerful, enough to turn an entire paladin squad into super soldiers. But the cost was monstrous disaster. Countless test subjects died because their bodies simply could not endure the witch's blood. One day, a researcher named Helen exploded in rage and shouted at a senior scientist, demanding to know what had become of his humanity as soldiers kept dying one after another. But the man remained unmoved, saying only that such sacrifices were necessary for a greater purpose. Helen angrily grabbed Nylis and shouted that people were not objects, and that no one, not even Nylis, was born to be a sacrifice. Those words struck Nylis like a heavy blow. After Helen was dragged away, Nylis quietly asked the scientist why she alone did not have a name. He lied to her, saying that special people did not need names. But she knew the truth. She had once accidentally overheard him arguing with someone else, saying that if they gave her a name, they would grow attached, and when the time came to dispose of her, it would become difficult. That memory stabbed into her heart like a dagger. But what truly shattered her entire world was the day she found that paladin with hollow, lifeless eyes that would never respond to her again. At last, the crushing weight of what she had done completely broke her. That year, she was 14. There were still 3.5 years left before she would finally betray the church. Back in the present, Nylis finished telling the story and confessed to Harvey that those hollow eyes still haunted her dreams to this day. After copying the last document she needed, she suddenly froze, abruptly realizing that Harvey did not know he himself was that very paladin from back then. She struggled to explain, but he gently interrupted her and told her not to force herself. Then she asked him whether, in his eyes, she was a vicious woman. Harvey looked at her in complete confusion and said plainly that the church was the one that should bear responsibility, not her. In an unwavering tone, he said that even if the tortured person really had been him, there was no way he could hate her for it. His unexpected forgiveness left her speechless and lit a faint spark of hope in her barren heart. And for the first time, she felt that she was no longer alone. The next day, after a noisy welcome party with her new colleagues, Nylis prepared to face her first day as head of the magic department, ready to meet her new team and a future she could finally call her own. For Nylis, the world had always been a struggle to maintain balance between the past life she could not forget and the present crisis she could not ignore. Her day began with trivial chatter from her new coworkers. One person complained about drinking too much the night before and being half dead with sleepiness today, while another fixated on the new earrings Nylis was wearing and kept pestering her about them. Nylis could only make up a casual lie, recalling how her partner Harvey had insisted they wear the enchanted communication earrings separately so as not to arouse suspicion. She claimed she had bought them at the market. It was a terribly boring answer for a nosy friend, but a necessary cover. Her meeting with the heads of each department was utter chaos. A man named Gale and a woman named Lena were already on the verge of coming to blows. They completely ignored the timid Mykarla, who was trying to stop the fight. It made Nylis wonder whether they had to beat each other senseless before they could accomplish anything. But what shocked her was that the usually quiet Mykarla suddenly exploded and harshly scolded the two of them into behaving. Afterward, Carla shyly explained to Nylis that despite all their arguing, they were actually very close. At last, the introductions could continue. Gale, the theorist from the Royal Magic Academy. Lena, a researcher demoted from the military because of her fiery temper. And Madrid, a handsome man from the East whose footsteps were unervingly silent. Nylis found him especially strange and noticed that he made almost no sound at all when he walked. Through the earrings, she informed Harvey about this unsettling encounter, and Harvey added more information. The spy they were tracking had to be one of these three. Gale was the most suspicious. Lena's record might also be a disguise, and Madrid's file was so clean that it seemed unnatural. Harvey confirmed that their target was one of them. Nylis was assigned to the library room of the magic department. The place was narrow and cluttered, but its secrecy suited her perfectly. It held the surviving research materials left behind by the church, a treasure trove of secrets she had to dig through. As she buried herself in the texts, she thought that, just as in her first life, all of this research was meaningless without witch's blood. But as she searched, a voice suddenly came from behind her. It was Madrid, holding the very book she had been looking for. His sudden appearance startled her, and he quietly asked her not to scream, explaining that he had snuck in. He asked why she was interested in the sun god, then unexpectedly launched into a surprisingly deep philosophical discussion, saying that faith was really a mirror reflecting human dreams and desires. He then shifted the topic to immortality, mentioning the church's failed experiments and a far more intriguing theory. He proposed that the legend of the witches stealing immortality might actually refer to their stealing time magic. Leaning close, Madrid whispered a chilling hypothesis. The witch who destroyed the church might have rewound time from the future. Nylis's heart froze instantly. His words struck her like a hammer. He knows, he has to know. But just as the tension in the air was becoming unbearable, Madrid suddenly laughed and brushed it all off as nothing more than wild speculation. He even invited her to join his department, and then Carla burst in and dragged the slacker away. Afterward, Nylis relayed the terrifying conversation to Harvey. She was convinced that Madrid was the spy, but Harvey disagreed. He felt that Madrid's excessive frankness was itself suspicious, and that a real spy would be far more concealed. He offered to protect her, but Nylis insisted she could handle it, though that confidence was rapidly crumbling. Even though she was once a powerful witch who had stood against the entire church and come out on top, deep unease still rose within her, a premonition that disaster was approaching. Soon, her foreboding came true. A new girl named Irene arrived with a package Carla had sent. Inside was a small vial said to contain seeds of astral vine. But Nylis smelled something else, the scent of blood mixed in with it. Acting on instinct, she suddenly shouted at Irene to drop it at once. She lunged forward and knocked the vial away. It shattered on the floor, and in an instant enormous thorned vines erupted violently, filling the entire room. Nylis threw herself over Irene, using her own body to shield the girl from the attack. Miles away, Harvey felt a sharp jolt through the earring, then cried out her name in despair and abandoned his training to run to her. The demonic vines tore through the roof of the library and bound Nylis tightly. As she protected Irene, the thorns sank deep into her skin. To her horror, she saw the vines begin to glow, drawing on her witch's blood to fuel their dreadful power. The moment she realized this had been a trap set specifically for her, her eyes widened in pain and shock. A warm memory, Harvey the bright smiling knight and the quiet, reserved Nylis, was torn apart in an instant by sudden violent chaos. Students fled in terror as a building was ripped open from within. Lena shouted Nylis's name, while the dangerous thorn vines surged outward, sealing off their only escape route. Trapped inside, Nylis was struck by a cold realization. This was why the one who was supposed to protect her had done nothing. Panic began to spread. She knew she had to find a way out, but a little boy named Hein clung to her in fear and refused to let go. A silent, prayer-like plea for help escaped her lips. She tried to soothe him, because she knew that if she released her magic now, she would very likely hurt the child as well. But her hesitation came at a terrible price. The writhing vines pierced Hein's skin and drew out his blood, while also detonating horrifying visions in Nylis's mind of past massacres and unspeakable atrocities. Just as despair was about to swallow them whole, a tremendous crash shattered the rubble. Harvey burst through the ruins with a wooden sword in hand, a beacon of hope in the dust-filled room. Nylis cried out his name, her voice trembling with both relief and fear. The moment Harvey realized the vines had taken Hein's blood, his face twisted with fury. With a wrathful roar, he leaped after the retreating tendrils, determined to hunt them down to the bitter end. Their friend Lena shouted for the others to look after Nylis and Hein, then charged into the fight herself, chasing after Harvey. Returning to the ruined hall, Karina rushed to Nylis's side and anxiously asked if she was all right. But Nylis had already begun analyzing the scene, her gaze sharp and full of suspicion. She noticed a shattered vial on the floor and immediately understood that this attack was no accident, but the result of a coordinated plan involving multiple people. At the same time, Harvey was relentlessly chasing those vines through the dense forest. He recognized them at a glance. Astral vines from his homeland. This kind of plant formed a bond with its master through blood. The way they moved confirmed his suspicion. Someone was controlling them and ordering them to retreat. He furiously swung his sword and cut them down, but that amount of damage was far from enough to stop them from escaping. The image of Nylis's despairing face flashed through his mind, further igniting his resolve as he pushed himself to the limit. Behind him, Lena screamed for him to stop, warning that a cliff lay ahead, but Harvey's momentum could no longer be checked. Without hesitation, he leaped off the precipice and plunged into the darkness in pursuit of his prey. A memory surfaced. In a chaotic laboratory littered with the remains of failed experiments, a despairing Nylis sat surrounded by them. Her student Mykarla burst in and proposed an idea, believing that cooling the wound might slow the deterioration. Nylis coldly dismissed it as useless, saying she had already tried that long ago. But Mykarla refused to give up, and Nylis finally lost control in a fit of rage, knocking the research documents from Mykarla's hands onto the floor. She collapsed to the ground and begged Mykarla to stop worrying about her, whispering that she would only become a burden now. Back in the present, Karina was tending Nylis's wound and remarked that she had never seen her teacher so emotionally out of control, not even when they had once been attacked by wolves. She could not help voicing her confusion over what was so special about Nylis's blood that it was worth such elaborate effort. Their superior approached and said that she had long known Nylis carried a heavy secret, but now that such a major incident had happened within her territory, she could no longer pretend not to see it. The students immediately declared that they were willing to help their teacher, but that request stirred another painful memory in Nylis. A crowd of furious townspeople shouting and cursing her as a witch. A mother who had lost her child aimed a gun at her, while her own hand were covered in blood, and she could do nothing but weep and wail in defeat. But Harvey's gentle voice echoed in her memory, promising that she would never have to bear it all alone again. Nylis forced herself to steady her heart, turned to her students, and told them that an enormous disaster was coming, and that she needed their help. 3 days later, a search party was combing the forest for Harvey. One reckless member of the group complained that Harvey was probably already dead or crippled, and that Mykarla would surely blame herself for it. Just as he was about to give up the search, a familiar vine suddenly wrapped around his arm. Before he could scream, his companion Leanna was violently knocked to the ground by an attacker lurking in the shadows. In another memory, Nylis's words, "You'll only become a burden," echoed in Mykarla's mind, intertwining with her family's vicious mockery from the past, when they sneered at her as useless trash. Desperate to prove everyone wrong, she resolved to work even harder. And then her eyes fell upon a syringe filled with Nylis's blood. A dark thought took root in her heart. A witch's blood was Pandora's box, the means by which an ordinary person could surpass a genius. This was her chance. Nylis, regretting her outburst, went to apologize to Mykarla, only to find her room completely empty, with nothing left on the table except a used syringe stained by splattered fluid. A horrifying image instantly flooded her mind. Mykarla drenched in blood, yet radiating astonishing power, asking whether she was finally no longer mediocre. At the same time, another victim of the experiment collapsed, her body burning with agony, while vines tightly bound her limbs. She knew she had to warn her superior, but her strength was already exhausted. In the dim room, the superior crossed another name off the list of failed test subjects. He ground his teeth in fury. After sacrificing the entire magic unit, not a single experiment had succeeded. As he stared out the window, wondering what any of this had meant, the door opened. The one who entered was my Carla's superior, the blonde officer, who demanded to know why the commander was in her room. The figure turned around, revealing a sinister face. It was none other than the little boy, Hein. Commander, on seeing that Hein was unharmed, my Carla nearly fainted from relief and even asked whether he could feel a strange power stirring inside him. But her gentle expression shattered in an instant, and the next second she slapped him hard across the face. She coldly told Hein to stop pretending, her eyes full of suspicion. A bizarre disease was spreading, yet he alone remained completely unharmed, and she also accused him of abandoning his companions. As her fear gradually took shape, she finally realized that he was the mastermind behind the attack on Nylis and the poisoning of the magic unit. The disguise ended there. Hein's innocent expression melted into a grim smile as he casually admitted his crimes. Violent vines burst from the ground and wrapped around my Carla, binding her tightly. He mocked her stupidity, claiming that the real poison was nothing else but the woman she had brought into their camp, the exceptionally gifted mage, Nylis. Madness burned in his eyes as he preached to her about the world's true law, that the strong are justice, and the strong yield only slightly, and only when the time is right. Just as his monologue grew more and more deranged, a calm voice from the doorway shattered the tense air. The one who had come was Nylis Gloral. She introduced herself again, then moved only slightly, and with a mere trace of power easily shattered Hein's vines. Then she spoke her true name, the title feared and whispered by others, which my Carla froze in place, too shocked to speak. Facing her two dumbfounded colleagues, Nylis declared with chilling confidence that her identity did not matter in the slightest, because dead people could not talk. In the next instant, she lunged forward and launched a savage attack at Hein. Hein could hardly believe she was serious. Nylis sharply demanded to know who had told him about the witch's blood, but Hein grabbed my Carla and used her as a shield. He began bitterly recounting his mediocre life. He had struggled day and night, only to end up as nothing more than a tool for geniuses, and had even given up his dream because of it. With scorn, he said that Nylis's arrival had been the only chance he had ever had to change his fate. Nylis screamed at him to let my Carla go, but Hein's eyes gleamed with madness. He took out a syringe filled with precious liquid and swore he would never waste it on my Carla. A terrible image flashed through Nylis's mind. My Carla, barely alive and covered in blood, still apologizing to her and saying that she had failed again. In despair, she told her friend to hold on no matter what. But my Carla only whispered that she had never been the kind of person who would be chosen, and that she had never been able to accept that truth. That painful memory intertwined with Hein's furious roar in the present. He prepared to inject the serum into himself, bellowing as he demanded to know why everything was so unfair. Just as the needle was about to pierce his skin, Harvey appeared like an afterimage and drove a kick straight into Hein's chest, sending the syringe flying. My Carla caught it in one swift motion, her face now holding nothing but calm, unwavering resolve. Hein was shocked not by that attack, but by the fact that his own astral vines were now obediently coiling around Nylis. All of this had been part of her plan from the beginning. She had already told my Carla that Harvey was safe and intended to use his feigned disappearance to lure out the traitor. She knew the culprit was after her blood, and so she needed my Carla to create a serum. Now the trap had fully closed. Harvey placed his blade at Hein's throat and growled that the crime of harming Nylis was enough to deserve death 1,000 times over. But Nylis calmly told him to stand down. She then turned to my Carla and reminded her that she understood better than anyone what kind of devastating consequences the serum in her hand could bring. Nylis thought back to a tragedy from the past and the question that had always tormented her. Had that girl's death been caused by the witch's blood or by her own arrogance? She told my Carla that what she represented was a slim sliver of hope and asked whether she was willing to gamble everything on it. Trembling, my Carla admitted that she had indeed been tempted by that power. The serum had seemed capable of freeing her from the unfair fate imposed by her own mediocrity. Hein desperately begged her to give it back to him, But Carla refused. She confessed the deep pain she had endured because of her ordinary talent. But then she spoke of her love for this work and the joy of solving problems together with her companions. She would not gamble her life and Heinz on such a faint sliver of hope. Heinz sneered that her efforts were meaningless, but Carla straightened her back and firmly declared that she believed there were still things she could do. Her conviction pierced through Heinz's anger, and tears streamed down his face. She reached out and embraced him, giving him one chance to be forgiven, but he knew that everything was already too late. Suddenly, his whole body convulsed, and he coughed up a large mouthful of blood. Nylis explained that even the tiny bit of serum that had gotten onto his body just now had already permanently destroyed his mana channels. Staring at his blood-stained hand, Hein muttered in despair that, as expected, he had never been one of the chosen. As the bound Hein was dragged away, Nylis reminded Harvey not to pity him. She told him that Hein had only brought this upon himself. Thoughtfully, she said that she understood the limits of genius better than anyone, and acknowledged that the gap created by talent truly was enormous. But then she added that over hundreds and thousands of years, the efforts of ordinary people, their discoveries and their ideas, had continued to accumulate layer upon layer, until they became the very foundation supporting the entire world. She softly promised the man who had already broken down that his efforts would not be meaningless either. When Nylis awoke, she found her friends gathered at her bedside, every face filled with worry. One of them asked whether they would be all right, and Harvey's brother reassured everyone that Nylis's serum would protect them from the witch's blood. He added that although the side effects were unavoidable, they should all wake up in a few days. The bespectacled, book-loving girl quietly thanked her. The atmosphere relaxed at once, and then the pink-haired girl introduced Wendy, a sentient vine, declaring that it was the true hero of this whole incident. She explained that after Harvey jumped off the cliff, he had actually run back home to find Wendy. The sentient vine had mixed in with Hein's vines and replaced the witch's blood in the syringe. With Hein arrested and no one dead, she happily announced that this was a perfect happy ending. But Harvey's expression remained grave, and he turned to the bespectacled girl and told her to come with him. He brought everyone into a private room and, with his hand on the doorknob, shut the door with ominous intent. A heavy silence filled the air, and after a moment, he finally asked her what she planned to do next. He told her not to play dumb, and said plainly that he was talking about the matter of Nylis being a witch. Their friends all stared in shock, but the pink-haired girl immediately stepped forward to speak for Nylis, saying that she would rather trust her own eyes than believe any rumor. She even nervously promised that she would never reveal Nylis's secret. However, the scholarly-looking girl remained silent the whole time, her expression full of worry. Harvey's gaze also gradually sharpened, his hand gripping the sword hilt tightly, afraid that the tragedy at the church would happen again. He suddenly lunged forward, but his friend immediately stepped in between and blocked the blade. Harvey stopped, his eyes fixed on the scholarly girl as he asked whether she had forgotten something important. He reminded her that his sister had once deliberately exposed her own identity in order to save innocent people caught up in disaster. He explained that if Nylis had truly wanted to harm them, she could have said nothing at all and simply let all of them die from the witch's blood. Harvey's words struck the scholarly girl hard. He rebuked her for being ungrateful, cold-hearted, and utterly without honor. Overwhelmed with shame, the girl dropped to her knees on the spot and apologized again and again. The others could not help wondering whether she was putting on an act, but Harvey told them they only needed to trust him because he was good at judging people, and that scholarly girl had only needed a reason she could believe in. Just as Harvey had expected, soon afterward, they saw the scholarly girl running through the garden, clearly having made up her mind. Meanwhile, Nylis stood before the grand doors of a church. A familiar black-haired man was waiting there for her. The corner of his mouth lifted as he smiled and said he had known she would come looking for him. Nylis got straight to the point and demanded to know why he had told Hein about her identity and about the witch's blood, pressing him on how he had learned of it in the first place. He calmly claimed it had only been a guess, but Nylis's instincts told her that a more sinister truth lay hidden underneath. She realized that nobles were enemies of an entirely different caliber, so she sharply demanded to know who he really was. But before he could answer, they were interrupted. A stunning woman appeared, with flame-red hair spilling over her shoulders and a meaningful smile on her lips. Nylis froze where she stood. That red hair instantly awakened her instinctive fear of witches. The woman said lightly that the look on Nylis's face suggested she already knew who she was. A name surfaced in Nylis's mind with bone-deep chill. Morgana, the first witch. Nylis realized that this person was the source of her genes, and in a sense could be considered her mother. But she should already have been dead, executed by the church. The only reason she could suddenly appear now was because Nylis had interfered with the timeline and triggered a chain reaction. Nylis demanded to know why Morgana, as a victim of the church, would still push Hein down that same dangerous road. Morgana scoffed and showed not the slightest concern for whatever casualties might occur. She even bluntly said that she hated all scholars, and that it would be splendid if they all died. With a cold laugh, she said that the so-called truths those people pursued were nothing more than things built on the sacrifices of others, and she mocked Nylis for still defending them even now. Morgana explained that she was not some special existence. She was merely a woman who dreamed prophetic dreams. She spoke of her past, a common girl from a foolish village whose dreams sometimes came true. At first, she only used that power for harmless little amusements. That lasted until a meaningless childhood quarrel made her lose control in anger. She viciously cursed a boy, shouting a prophecy that his house would burn down and that he would be trapped inside and die. To her horror, it actually happened. Consumed by fear, the villagers branded her a witch and a murderer. She was not even 10 years old before they dragged her to the stake to be burned alive. A member of the church saved her from the flames. But it was no salvation at all. She had merely been handed from one nightmare into another. Her power kept spiraling out of control, and in the end, she was mercilessly discarded again. That should have been her end. Bound in chains, body and mind broken. She spent 10 full years trying to escape, but her dreams foretold nothing but failure. Until one day, the researcher she had seduced suddenly burst in, shoved a key in her hand, and screamed for her to run, because the true witch had finally appeared. Nylis's arrival shattered the original rules of fate, and so a completely new future was born. Looking at Nylis, Morgana told her that in a world where no one could change the ending of the story, Nylis was the only variable. Morgana had no desire to return to a cage, so she offered a warning. She explained the grandfather paradox to Nylis. If you go back to the past and kill your own ancestor, then you yourself will cease to exist. Morgana pointed out that Nylis had already stopped the church's immortality plan twice and saved countless people. But then she posed a horrifying question. If the plan to create witches has been stopped, then who is Nylis? A savior from another timeline? The implication plunged Nylis into total shock. After that, the mood shifted abruptly as Harvey and his friends finally returned to their home village. Friends and neighbors rushed over all at once, tearfully welcoming him back in excitement. Everyone talked over one another, greeting him and asking for his help. And at that moment, Nylis also stepped out of the carriage. The villagers instantly fell silent, their attention captured by this older sister they had not seen in 6 years. A little boy named Colin approached her with innocent curiosity. But Nylis, unused to contact with people, instinctively slapped his hand away. The crowd immediately gasped, and Nylis panicked at once. Harvey calmly picked the child up and explained that his sister's dress carried protective magic and might hurt him. Nylis immediately played along, and only then did the villagers relax, deciding that Harvey's sister was, after all, still a good person. Nylis could not help reflecting that she truly was terrible at dealing with people, and that nearly every connection she had in this world, whether with friends or villagers, had been built through Harvey. The boy's mother insisted on inviting Nylis to join them for dinner. Very soon, the entire village cheerfully began preparing a feast to celebrate her recovery, surrounding her with a kind of warmth she had never experienced before. But that peace was utterly shattered by Morgana's final cruel words. Morgana had told her that because she herself had personally brought the immortality plan to an end, Nylis would therefore never be born. Now this world was slowly erasing her existence. There would be no corpse and no name left behind, as if she had never existed at all. When Nylis asked how much time she had left, Morgana gave her a cold conclusion. At most, 3 days. The village was bustling as a grand banquet was being prepared for the night order. But despite the mountains of food before him, Harvey seemed weighed down by his thoughts. His friend Ram pulled him out of his daze and asked why he would not join the Night Order, reminding him that it had been his lifelong dream. Being recommended into the Corps of the Night Order was undoubtedly tempting, but Harvey's resolve remained firm. He admitted that it truly had been his dream, but he did not want to get too close to them. His true first priority was a secret, protecting his sister, Nylis. He believed that he could keep her from harm. But the painful memories of suspicion and betrayal still clung to him, a wound that could never truly fade. He was determined to eliminate any possibility of such a thing ever happening again, even if the chance was only 1 in 1,000. His friend Emily suddenly cut in, pointing out that he was being ruled by his emotions. She rebuked him, saying that if he based every choice on another person, he would eventually lose himself. Harvey quietly admitted that she was not wrong. But with a gentle smile, he defined his entire existence around a single purpose: to remain by Nylis's side and protect her. Emily could only stare at him in disbelief before loudly declaring that he was completely obsessed with her little sister. Her outburst immediately caused a commotion. Harvey shook his head at her loss of composure and turned toward the smithy, the ringing clang of hammer on iron sounding in his ears. When he stepped inside, he found his sister Nylis hard at work. She greeted him warmly, then immediately handed him a newly forged sword and told him to try it out. He split a piece of wood with ease, but Nylis was still dissatisfied. She insisted the weapon's balance was unstable and said that if he actually used it, people would laugh at him, so she would make another one. Only then did Harvey realize that the sword was meant for him. He looked at her in surprise, and she confirmed it. She explained that he was still using a basic model sword, so she wanted to forge one for him with her own hands and reinforce it with her magic. Even though she grumbled that metalworking was far too difficult, his heart still swelled with emotion. He told Nylis that as long as she was by his side, he needed nothing else in the world. Later, at a lively banquet, Nylis sat alone, looking especially lonely amid the celebrating crowd. A dark and malicious voice whispered in her mind, mocking her and asking if she intended to die alone in a corner. She admitted to herself that she really had thought that once, but backed down at the last moment. She simply could not bear the thought of her friends carrying eternal regret because of her. She imagined Harvey's grief pushed to its absolute limit, and that was even harder to endure than death itself. Seeing him finally pull himself together and keep moving forward also let her glimpse a sliver of hope. Perhaps he could do what she could not. Just then, Harvey's bright voice cut through her dark thoughts. He ran toward her, his face full of joy, excitedly telling her that everyone was going dancing and that Shirley wanted to know whether she would go with him. A gentle smile touched her lips as she thanked him and told him that because he had been there, she had never felt alone during these past 6 years. She remembered the ordinary life she had once imagined, a dream that had once seemed so close to reality. But that dream shattered in an instant. A strand of black energy struck her suddenly. She cried out his name and collapsed. Harvey caught her before she could hit the ground. Panic was written all over his face. Emily rushed over and asked if she was sick, but their teacher suddenly appeared and sternly ordered Ram not to touch her. Emily instantly flared up at his coldness, but a single look from him silenced her. Nylis's body began to give off an eerie glow. The teacher merely repeated his warning, his voice heavy with grim finality. Harvey carried Nylis to her bed. He desperately tried to heal her, but his magic did nothing. Outside, Ram explained the horrifying situation to the panicked Emily. Nylis's body was disappearing, starting from her legs, and there was no way to stop it. Emily begged him to think of something, but Ram was completely out of options. He confessed that even Nylis herself had been unable to stop it, so what hope did he have? Then Ram revealed the truly terrifying part of their situation. The villagers had no memory of yesterday's banquet. In fact, they did not even remember Nylis at all. It was as though she had never existed. One woman asked Harvey why he was living alone. Horrified, Ram declared that this was not a power they should meddle with and suggested that doing nothing was the best choice, because this had been Nylis's own decision. But Harvey's resolve completely collapsed. In a trembling voice, he objected and turned to leave. Ram grabbed him, trying to stop him. Harvey turned back, his eyes filled with a horrifying mix of grief and rage, and declared that Nylis had made him unable to live without her, so she could not just leave him behind like this. Ram begged him to calm down and demanded to know what he could possibly do when he did not even have a plan. Harvey shouted back that he did not know. He only knew that he was about to lose her forever. In the end, all his strength gave out. He dropped to his knees and begged his friends to help him. At that most desperate moment, a figure dropped down from a nearby tree. A red-haired woman landed hard on the ground, anything but gracefully. She lifted her head, wearing a faintly teasing smile, and asked if they needed help. In the aftermath of the magical backlash, Harvey knelt inside the glowing circle, cradling the fading Nylis in his arms. It felt as though a whole world now separated this moment from the days when he had once held her with nothing more than simple tenderness. The stern red-haired woman summoned one of Nylis's students. The student released golden magic, temporarily halting her disappearance. The student visibly let out a sigh of relief, but the woman's expression remained grave. She explained that it was only a temporary measure. The current Nylis was a being who should not exist in this world. The only way to save her was to strengthen her connection to the world, and the person most strongly connected to her was Harvey. She proposed leaving a permanent mark on him, a tether to draw Nylis back from the void. But it came with a terrible risk. If Nylis vanished forever, his own fate would be sealed along with hers. Harvey asked in a taut voice whether this method had ever been proposed to Nylis herself. The woman confirmed that it had, and recalled that Nylis had fiercely rejected the idea. Then she revealed a heartbreaking truth. Nylis had chosen to sacrifice herself in order to protect him. Grief nearly crushed Harvey as he urgently asked when she would wake up. But the answer offered no comfort at all. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 20 years from now. Despite the bleakness of that prospect, Harvey's resolve did not waver in the slightest. He declared that he would wait for her, just as he had been prepared to do from the moment she first showed him kindness. Meanwhile, Nylis's consciousness drifted into a vast starry void, the deepest place within her heart where all her memories were stored. She rejected that past, shattered a mirror reflecting Nylis's life, and declared that her mission as a transmigrator was complete. She clung desperately to the hope of returning to her own world, believing that such an ordinary life had to be better than the tragedy she had been forced to endure. But a voice pierced her fantasy, mocking her for trying to escape her true identity. A ghostly figure appeared in the shattered mirror, forcing her to face the brutal truth of her past. Memories came flooding back. The pain of losing her friend Mykarla, the co-workers whispering behind her back that she was worthless, and the horrifying fact that while she had been absent, they had been carrying out those vile human experiments. When she confronted them in furious outrage, they simply shifted the blame, claiming that the higher-ups only wanted results and that all of this had only happened after she gave up. Crushed by guilt, she believed that every sin rested on her alone. At that moment, her moral code completely collapsed. In despair, she unleashed her power, and a torrent of flames instantly burned one researcher to ashes. Then came a horrifying realization. She herself was a curse, and everywhere she went she brought only pain. Her entire existence felt like a trap. Ambition was wrong, cold detachment was wrong, submission was wrong, resistance was wrong. She fled into a desolate, snowy forest, only to be driven into a dead end by nights. There she suffered the ultimate betrayal. Harvey drove a sword through her body. She felt that from the very beginning, her life had been a mistake. As she died, her only wish was that she would never again live as a witch. Back in the void, the ghostly image of her past self offered her a way out, stay in the darkness, and leave all the pain behind. But when Nylis reached out to take that hand, she stopped. A spark of defiance flared to life within her, and she asked the shadow in return. If there had been a chance, why had she not simply chosen the easier death back then? She remembered standing once at the edge of total annihilation, and yet she had still chosen to live. With a clarity she had never known before, Nylis declared that she would never abandon her will to survive, even if it meant embracing every painful memory. At her declaration, the phantom of the past shattered with a crash, admitting that Nylis had finally found where she truly belonged. A peaceful smile appeared on her lips, and she decided it was time to go back. Nylis awoke in a sunlit room. Her hair was far longer than she remembered, and she could not help wondering how much time had passed. The door creaked open. It was Harvey, carrying a bouquet of flowers. His eyes flew wide with shock and a surge of overwhelming emotion. The bouquet slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. Tears streamed endlessly down his face as he choked out her name in a trembling voice. Emily had come over with a heavy heart, her luggage already packed, ready to say goodbye to Harvey. She explained that Mike Carla had recommended her to the Magic Academy, and she could not pass up this opportunity, even if it meant leaving for a very long time. Harvey remained silent the whole time, his head lowered as he worked with his hands, until she finally asked whether he was even listening. Still facing away from her, Harvey finally spoke in a steady voice. He admitted that meeting Nylis had changed his life. Before she appeared, his life had no direction. She was the one who showed him the true beauty of magic, and now he knew that he had to devote his entire life to the study of it. Emily said that even if it made her look like she was abandoning Nylis, she still had to seize this chance, and she urged Harvey to keep living his own life too. To her surprise, Harvey turned around with a gentle smile and told her he was glad she had found her path, assuring her that he was all right now. He was no longer gloomy. He explained that his new goal was to make Nylis a bigger, more comfortable bed, while also honing his swordsmanship, determined to become more mature and stronger before she woke up. Only then did Emily feel relieved, agreeing that they all needed to keep moving forward. After waving goodbye one last time, she left, leaving him behind to continue his work. But the very second her figure disappeared, the smile on Harvey's face vanished as well, leaving behind only a cold and empty expression. And so his waiting began. Day 73 passed. On day 76, he was still training desperately with his shield. Days blurred into years, and the count climbed past 1,000. He waited while helping the villagers. 2,555 nights, 7 full years. The endless vigil finally broke him. He collapsed beside her bed, covering his face with both hands as he sank into utter despair. Then a small change appeared. After 7 years of silence, Nylis opened her eyes. What she saw was a man she could hardly recognize. Hesitantly, she asked if he was Harvey. In her confusion, she suddenly threw herself at him and hugged him, desperate to know what had happened and how long she had been asleep. She looked around the familiar room, then turned back to the grown man holding her, and a flicker of fear crossed her eyes, because he reminded her of the hunters who had once pursued her. But Harvey had already been completely swallowed by the storm of his emotions. He held her tightly, as if she were a phantom that might fade again at any moment, murmuring that she had come back and apologizing again and again for making her wait so long. He swore that he would never leave her again and begged her not to go. After calming down a little, Nylis asked him to tell her everything that had happened over the years. Harvey still maintained the same constant vigilance as always and told her that everyone had been doing fairly well over the years. Ram had inherited the family trading business, while Emily was studying at the Magic Academy, so he had not yet informed them that she was awake, because he did not want to disturb Emily's studies. He also assured her that, just as she had wished, he had joined the Knights of Heimdall's Light, becoming a holy knight, and had grown strong enough to protect her from anything. Nylis studied him carefully. He looked healthy and neat, but his eyes told an entirely different story. Deeply sunken and darkened, they carried a bone-deep exhaustion that sent a chill through her. And when he rested his head on her lap and asked her to stroke him like she used to, the feeling only grew stronger. A strong sense of unease rose inside her. He was an adult now, and that kind of intimacy felt wrong, so she pulled her hand back. That made him ask whether something was wrong. She saw right through his act and asked him directly how long it had been since he had slept. He tried to brush it off, but she would not allow it and ordered him to go to sleep immediately. He agreed, but only on the condition that she go back to bed and rest afterward as well. After he lay down, Nylis was crushed beneath a suffocating guilt and apologized to him, saying she had left him all alone and admitting that she had wounded him deeply. She remembered the empty house they had first found and how Harvey had turned it into a home with flowers and warmth. She confessed that she had even wished he would hit her or yell at her or blame her for abandoning him, but she knew that with his gentle nature, he could never do such things. He only made her swear that she would never leave him again, and she agreed. Yet the moment she tried to return to her own room, panic seized him instantly. He lunged forward and grabbed her hand, his voice trembling as he begged her not to go and reminded her of the promise she had just made. His desperate request that he want to sleep with her. hung in the air. He pressed her down onto the bed, his face full of fear, and admitted that after 7 years, he could no longer be sure she would not disappear again. He could not bear to wake up and find her gone. Nylis was devastated by the rawness of his trauma and finally agreed, but firmly placed a barrier of pillows between them. That night, he stared at her without moving at all, never once closing his eyes. Even after she fell asleep, his vigil did not break. The next morning, she woke with a scream and found him wrapped tightly around her. When she opened the wardrobe, however, she discovered that it was completely empty. From the kitchen, Harvey calmly told her that he had put away her clothes and taken them out to air, so all she needed to wear was her nightgown. He quickly shut down her idea of going into the village, claiming that too much excitement would be bad for her recovery. He even said with a hint of pride that the house had enough food stored for months, and that he had learned to cook anything she wanted to eat. Sitting at the table, Nylis finally realized in horror that he had no intention of ever letting her leave again. A shadow passed over Harvey's face, and in those gentle eyes of his, a chilling possessiveness now gleamed.